My 5-year-old daughter was so excited to be the flower girl at my sister's wedding. But when she woke up, her beautiful hair was gone. My mom had cut it while she slept. Your sister is the bride. She should be the prettiest. My daughter started crying. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The phone rang at 6 on a Tuesday evening, and Derek Lawson knew who it was before he looked. He knew because of the hour. His family never called him in the morning. They never called when things were going well. They called at the end of the day, when the bills had been opened, when the mail had been sorted, when somebody had finally added up a number and did not like the answer. He set his fork down on the edge of the plate. Across the table, his 5-year-old daughter was building a small tower out of green beans and had almost gotten it to stand. Daddy, look. I see it's sophomore. That's a good tower. It's a castle. Even better. The phone kept buzzing against the wood. Derek picked it up. Hi, Mom. Carol Lawson did not start with hello. She never did. She started in the middle, the way people do when they have already had the conversation in their own head and expect you to catch up. The furnace people came out today. Okay. They said the whole unit is on its last legs. 22 years old. He showed me the rust. Derek closed his eyes for a second. He could hear the kitchen behind her voice. The little television she kept on the counter. The clink of a spoon in a mug. What did they quote you? He wrote it down somewhere. 3,800, I think. Maybe 41 with the labor. Did you call anybody else for a second price? Derek, I'm 63 years old. I don't know how to shop for a furnace. He looked at his daughter. She had knocked the green beans over and was rebuilding. I'll make some calls tomorrow, he said. Don't sign anything yet. He's holding the appointment. Let him hold it. There was a small pause on the line. Then the softening. He knew the softening. It arrived like clockwork, right after the number. You're a good son. I tell people that. I tell them my son takes care of me. Good night, Mom. He put the phone face down on the table and looked at his plate. The chicken had gone cold on one side. This was the 3rd year of it. His father had died on a Sunday in March, in a hospital hallway in Cedar Ridge, Ohio, while Derek was still 40 minutes out on the highway with his flashers on. He had spent that whole drive rehearsing what he would say when he got there. He never got to say any of it. Instead, he stood in a corridor that smelled like floor cleaner and listened to a doctor use very careful words. And then he walked outside and sat in his SUV in the parking garage for a long time without turning the key. Somewhere in that garage, without saying it out loud, he had made a decision. He would take care of them. His mother, who had never once written a check in her marriage. His sister, who was 26 then and had already learned that if she waited long enough, someone else would fix it. For 3 years he had kept that quiet promise. Not with speeches. With bank transfers. He paid $420 a month toward his mother's mortgage. He carried her car insurance on his own policy because it was cheaper that way, and because if he had left it in her name, she would have let it lapse. When the grocery money ran thin at the end of the month, he ordered a delivery and told her it was a mistake, that he had double-ordered, that she would be doing him a favor by taking it. She always took it. She never asked twice. Derek was 34. He worked as a regional equipment salesman for a company that sold loaders and skid steers to contractors across 4 counties. He drove 1,800 miles a month. He ate a lot of gas station coffee. He knew the name of every dispatcher between Cedar Ridge and the Indiana line. He was not rich. That was the part his family had never understood, or had chosen not to. What he had was discipline. After Anna died, when Sophie was 11 months old, Derek had done the only thing that made sense to him. He organized. He built a savings account the way other men build a shed, one board at a time, on weekends alone. Emergency money, college money, the kind of money that means a child does not have to hear her father say no. He had a modest house with a stubborn back door, one SUV with 140,000 miles on it and new brakes. A daughter who slept with a stuffed rabbit that had lost most of one ear. That was the whole inventory. Daddy. He looked up. Sophie had abandoned the castle. Yeah, baby. Was that Grandma? That was Grandma. Is she coming over? Not tonight. Sophie accepted this the way children accept most things, without argument, and went back to her plate. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday, his sister called. Bridget Lawson was 29 and had been out of work for 3 months. She had spent 4 years at a dental office off Route 9, answering phones and scheduling cleanings, and she had walked out after a disagreement with her manager over the schedule. Derek had heard 3 different versions of that argument. In the first version, the manager had yelled at her. In the second, the manager had been sarcastic in front of a patient. In the third, Bridget had simply said the place was toxic and left it there. She had applied for a few jobs after that. She had gone to one interview, come home, and decided the commute was too long. Derek did not judge her out loud. He had learned that judgment shared out loud only bought him an argument, and arguments only bought him a phone call from his mother. He answered on the second ring. Derek. Her voice was high and fast. He could hear her smiling through it. What happened? Nothing bad. Something good. Sit down. I'm standing in my garage. Wesley asked me. It took him a second. Asked you what? To marry him. She laughed. He did it at the lake. He had the ring in his jacket the entire time, and he kept touching the pocket, and I thought he had a stomachache. Derek felt himself smile. That was the honest part. He was happy for her. Wesley Grant was a decent man who worked in HVAC and fixed his own truck and had never once, in 2 years, asked Derek for $1. That's good news, Bridge. That's really good news. I know. She was crying a little. Mom already told half the church. Of course she did. You'll be there, right? I'll be there. He meant it, standing in his garage with the door open and the smell of cut grass drifting in from the neighbor's yard. He meant every word of it. He had no idea what that promise would cost him. He had no idea it would end with him on his knees on a bedroom carpet at 7 in the morning, holding his daughter's face in both hands, looking at what somebody had done to her while she slept. But that was 11 months away. That night, he just felt like a good brother. Sophie adored her aunt. That was the part that stayed with him afterward. Not the cruelty, the adoration. His daughter loved a woman who could not be bothered to look at her for more than 4 seconds at a time, and she loved her completely, with the whole open front of her chest, the way small children love before anybody teaches them to hold back. Sophie kept a drawing of Bridget on the refrigerator. It was mostly hair. Bridget had good hair, thick and dark, and Sophie had spent nearly an hour on it with a brown crayon until the paper wore soft in the middle. The wedding planning started in October, and Derek began to notice things he had spent 3 years not noticing. He noticed that when Sophie ran across a room toward Bridget, Bridget's shoulders came up, just slightly, the way a person braces before a door slams. She would put a hand out, palm flat, and catch Sophie at arm's length, and turn the hug into a pat. Careful, sweetie. This is dry clean. He noticed that when he pulled out his phone to show a photo, Bridget's eyes went to it and slid right off. Cute, she said once before the screen had even finished loading. Did Mom tell you about the venue? He noticed that in every conversation about the wedding, there was a small, quiet subtraction happening. Sophie was being removed from it one piece at a time, and nobody was saying so. It came into the open on a Sunday in November, in his mother's kitchen, over 3-ring binders and a plate of store-bought cookies. Carol had spread everything across the table. Fabric swatches, printed pages from websites, the ink already fading. A guest list in her looping handwriting with names crossed out and rewritten. Sophie stood on the chair beside Derek, both hands on the table edge, looking at the flowers. I like the white ones, she said. Nobody answered her. She tried again, louder, the way children do when they think the volume is the problem. Aunt Bridget, I like the white ones with the yellow in the middle. Bridget turned a page. Can I help pick? She's too young. It came out flat and immediate, without a pause to soften it. Bridget did not even look up from the binder. Derek felt his jaw set. He kept his voice light. She's picking flowers, Bridge, not signing the contract. It's not a game, Derek. There are actual decisions here. Sophie's hands came off the table. She sat down on the chair. Derek watched her do it, and felt something small and hot move through his chest. Then she asked the other question, the one she had clearly been holding all week, because she asked it the way kids ask when they have practiced. Can I be the flower girl? The kitchen went quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car door shut. Bridget looked at their mother first. Derek saw it. It lasted less than a second, but he saw it, and he would think about it later more than almost anything else. His sister had looked at Carol before she answered a 5-year-old. Sure, Bridget said. I guess. Fine. Sophie lit up like a struck match. She turned in her chair and grabbed Derek's sleeve with both hands and shook it. Daddy, Daddy, I'm the flower girl. I heard, baby. I get a basket. You get a basket. Carol picked up a cookie and broke it in half without eating either piece. She'll probably make a mess, she said. Derek looked at his mother. Her face was pleasant. That was the thing about Carol Lawson. She could say something with a blade in it and keep her expression as smooth as a church pew. She's 5, he said. She's supposed to scatter flowers. That's the whole job description. There's scattering and there's throwing. Mom. Bridget let out a long breath through her nose and closed the binder. Look, I just don't want the wedding becoming a children's party. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Derek sat with that for a moment. There was one child on the guest list. One. His daughter. There was no risk of the reception turning into anything. What Bridget meant was simpler and uglier than what she said, and both of them knew it, and neither of them was going to name it in front of Sophie. He could have named it. He almost did. He felt the words come up into his throat, sharp and ready. Then Sophie leaned against his arm, still glowing, still holding on to her basket like it already existed. And Derek did what he had been doing for 3 years. He let it go. Nobody's turning it into a party, he said. It'll be fine. Thank you, Bridget said, and opened the binder again. He drove home that night with Sophie asleep in the back seat, her chin down on her chest, the streetlights sliding across her face in slow bars. He thought about his father. Ray Lawson had been a quiet man with a bad knee and a habit of standing in doorways instead of coming all the way into a room. Derek had exactly one memory of his father raising his voice at Carol, and it had been about Bridget. She had been 15. She had wrecked the family car in a parking lot, and Carol had told the insurance company that Ray had been driving. His father had stood in that doorway and said, "You're going to make her into somebody who never has to be sorry." Carol had said, "She's my daughter," and that had been the end of it. Ray went out to the garage. Derek, 17, and sitting on the stairs where nobody could see him, had learned the family rule that night and had never forgotten it. You did not win against Carol Lawson. You went out to the garage. At a red light, he looked in the mirror at his sleeping daughter. He told himself he was keeping the peace. He told himself that was a kind of strength, absorbing things so nobody had to fight. He did not understand yet what he was actually doing. Every time he stayed quiet, his mother and his sister moved the line a little further. Not because they were plotting, because he had shown them, over and over, in 1,000 small moments, that the line would move if they leaned on it. They had never once found the edge of him, so they had no way of knowing where it was. Neither did he. The word help is a slippery thing. It never announces the moment it changes shape. It happened for Derek in a booth at a diner on Fremont Street in early December, with a cup of coffee going cold in front of him and his sister sitting across the table with her phone in both hands and her eyes already wet. "I did the math last night," Bridget said. "I did it 4 times. Okay. The venue alone is more than everything I thought the whole thing would cost. What's the number?" She turned the phone around and slid it across the laminate. Derek read it. He did not react. 20 years of sitting across tables from contractors had taught him not to react to a number in front of the person who wrote it. "That's the venue for the day," he said. "Not catering. Catering is separate. What about Wesley? He's putting in what he has. He's got 11,000 saved, and his mother's giving 4. Her voice cracked on the 4. "It's not enough, Derek. It's not close." "Then make it smaller." She looked up at him. "I can make it smaller," she said. "I can make it a backyard. I can make it folding chairs in Mom's yard in the mud in April with a cooler." She wiped under her eye with the side of her thumb. "Is that what you want from me?" "That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Bridge. I'm 29 years old and I have nothing." She said it quietly, and that was what got him, because Bridget was rarely quiet. "You have a house. You have a career. You have Sophie. I have a bedroom in Mom's house, and a wedding I can't pay for." The waitress came by with the pot. Derek put his hand flat over his cup and shook his head, and she moved on. He thought about it for maybe 15 seconds. He has gone over those 15 seconds many times since. "I'll handle the wedding expenses you can't cover," he said. Bridget's face broke open. She came around the side of the booth and hugged him hard enough to knock his shoulder into the wall, and she set it into the side of his neck. You're the best brother in the world. He believed her. That was not weakness. He wants to be clear with himself about that. Even now, it was not weakness to believe his own sister. It was just the last time he ever did. 2 weeks before the wedding, on a Wednesday night in April, Derek sat at his kitchen table with a manila folder and a legal pad and added it all up. The house was quiet. Sophie was in bed. The dishwasher was running its last cycle, a low churn behind the wall. Outside the window, rain came down steady and thin, the kind that would go all night. He wrote the items in a column in his blocky handwriting. Venue deposit and balance. Catering, 120 plates, plus the vendor meals. Flowers, including the arch Bridget had seen online and could not stop talking about. Photographer, 8 hours, second shooter. DJ, plus the uplighting Carol had insisted on. Decorations, the linens, the chair covers, the $400 of candles. Transportation, because Bridget wanted a car for the bridal party and Carol had agreed it would look nice in the pictures. He totaled the column twice. He got the same answer both times. Derek sat back in the chair and looked at the number and did not move for a while. It was more than a year of Sophie's daycare. It was the new roof he had been putting off for 2 summers. It was the emergency fund, cut into and bleeding. He heard the small feet in the hallway before he saw her. Daddy. She was in the doorway in her cat pajamas with the rabbit hanging from one hand. Her hair was pushed sideways from the pillow. Hey, you're supposed to be asleep. I had a dream about the flowers. He turned his chair. Come here. She came over and climbed into his lap and put her head against his chest, and he felt her whole weight settle, the way it does when a child stops holding herself up. Are we really going to Aunt Bridget's wedding? Of course we are. I'm still the flower girl. Yes. She sat up straight. Really still? Really still. She slid off his lap and did a little jump, both feet leaving the floor, the rabbit swinging. Then she remembered she was supposed to be in bed and looked at him guiltily. Go on, he said. I'll come tuck you. He listened to her run down the hall. Then he looked back at the folder. He closed it. 3 years. He had been doing this for 3 years, and until that night he had never really let himself look at the shape of it. Every month, money moved out of his house and into theirs. Every month, the amount was a little larger. And in 3 years, not one time, not once, had either of them called him to ask how he was doing. They called when the furnace died. They called when the insurance renewed. They called when the wedding cost more than expected. He was not a brother and a son to them. He was a resource, a line item that answered the phone. And something in him had begun to shift. He could feel it the way you feel weather coming, a pressure change before anything visible happens. He was starting to understand that helping someone and allowing someone to use you are 2 completely different things, and that they can look identical from the outside for years. He put the folder in the drawer. He turned off the kitchen light. He went down the hall to tuck his daughter in, and she was already asleep with her arm around the rabbit, and he stood there in the dark for a minute just watching her breathe. Whatever this was going to cost, he thought he could handle it. He always had. He did not know he was 11 days away from finding the edge of himself. He did not know what it would take to get him there. The wedding was set for 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. They stayed at Carol's house on Friday night because the venue was only 10 minutes from her street, and because Bridget had asked, and because Derek had said yes to everything for 3 years and did not know how to start saying no. Sophie had been unbearable in the best way all evening. She had shown the blue dress to everyone twice. She had walked the length of the hallway 11 times, counting her steps out loud, practicing the pace. She had made Derek hold the flower crown while she checked herself in the hall mirror. Is it straight? It's straight. It has to be straight, Daddy. It's perfect. She had finally gone down around 9:30 in the small back bedroom, the one that had been Derek's when he was a boy, with the blue dress hanging on the closet door where she could see it if she woke up. Derek slept badly. He always did in that house. The radiator ticked at odd hours, and there was a street light outside that came through the blinds in stripes. At 7 in the morning, he woke up to crying. He knew the sound. Every parent has a file in their head of every noise their child makes, and Derek knew instantly that this was not a bad dream and not a stubbed toe. It was low and steady and strange. It sounded like a child trying to cry quietly, trying not to be heard. He was up before he was awake. His feet hit the cold floorboards and he went down the hall in a t-shirt and sweatpants and pushed open the bedroom door. Sophie was sitting on the edge of the bed. She had her hands in her lap. She was still in her nightgown. She was looking straight down at the carpet, and her shoulders were going up and down in small jumps. Her hair was gone. Not all of it. That was somehow worse. Someone had taken it off in uneven handfuls, high on the left side, lower on the right, in a hard line across the back that angled up toward one ear. 3 inches. Maybe 4. It had been long enough to reach the middle of her back on Friday night when he brushed it. Now it stopped in a ragged shelf below her jaw, and there was a piece near her temple that was shorter than the rest and stuck out sideways. On the floor by the closet, her flower crown lay where it had fallen. The blue dress was still on the hanger above it. Derek did not remember crossing the room. He remembered being on his knees on the carpet, and the carpet was cold, and his hands were on either side of her face. Sophie! Sophie, look at me. She looked up. Daddy, I'm here. Her chin was shaking. She put one hand up to the side of her head and touched it, quickly, the way you touch a burn. Grandma cut it. For words. He heard them and everything in the room got very sharp and very slow at the same time. The tick of the radiator. The smell of coffee from down the hall. The gray light on the wall. He heard water running in the bathroom across the hall. Derek stood up. He put his hand on Sophie's shoulder. Stay here. 1 minute. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right there. He walked to the bathroom door. Carol was standing at the sink in her robe with her hair set in rollers. She was rinsing something out of a cup. She looked up at him in the mirror, and her face did not change at all. On the counter beside the soap dish were her sewing scissors. The heavy ones with the black handles. They had been in a drawer in that house for 20 years. There was hair on the counter. Small dark pieces of it, stuck to the porcelain where the water had splashed. You cut her hair. Carol shut off the tap and dried her hands on the towel. She took her time about it. Yes. Derek felt the floor go strange under him. Some part of him had still been waiting for another answer. An accident. A misunderstanding. A story where a 5-year-old found the scissors herself. Why? Carol folded her arms. She turned around and leaned against the sink, comfortable like they were talking about the weather on the porch. She looked too much like a little princess. Derek did not move. Say that again. You heard me. Carol lifted her chin. That dress. That crown. All that hair down her back. She was going to walk down the aisle, and every single person in that room was going to be looking at her. That's what a flower girl is. Bridget is the bride. Carol's voice had a hard little edge in it now, the one she used when she was explaining something obvious to somebody slow. She should be the one everyone notices. It's her day. It's her one day. Derek looked past his mother at the hair on the counter. Did you say that to her? Say what? To my daughter. Did you tell her that? Carol shrugged. One shoulder. Dismissive. I told her she needed to understand that today isn't about her. Behind him, down the hall, Derek could hear Sophie still crying in that small, careful way, trying to keep it inside her chest, and he understood exactly why she was trying. Somebody had already told her once this morning that her feelings were an inconvenience. She's 5 years old, he said. She's old enough to learn. You went into a bedroom while a 5-year-old was asleep. His voice came out low and level, and it frightened him a little, how level it was. You stood over my daughter with scissors in your hand, and you cut her hair off while she was sleeping. It will grow back. That isn't the point. It's exactly the point. In 4 months, you won't even be able to tell. Carol rolled her eyes toward the ceiling. You're always too sensitive about that child. That child. Not Sophie. Not her name. Not my granddaughter. That child. Derek reached past his mother and picked up the scissors off the counter. They were heavier than they looked. The blades were still cold. He held them in his hand and looked at them, and for one honest second he understood what people mean when they say they saw red, and then the second passed and left him colder and clearer than he had ever been in his life. You had no right. Carol's voice went up. I am her grandmother, and I'm her father. They looked at each other. Something was happening in the room, and Carol had not caught up to it yet. She was still standing in the version of the world where she said a sentence and Derek absorbed it, where he went out to the garage, where he came back an hour later and asked if she wanted anything from the store. She had never seen him look at her like this, because he never had. "Don't be dramatic," she said, but there was a small crack in it. Derek set the scissors in the sink. Then he walked out of the bathroom without another word, and he did not look back, and he went to his daughter. Sophie had not moved. He sat down on the bed beside her and pulled her onto his lap and held the back of her head with his hand, over the place where the hair ended in that ugly, ragged line. "It's okay, baby. I wanted to be pretty. You are. It's messed up now. Listen to me." He put his hand under her chin and lifted it so she had to look at him. "Nothing about you is messed up. Nothing. Somebody did something to you that they should never have done, and that is about them. It is not about you. Do you understand me?" She nodded, which meant she did not understand. Not really, not at 5. But she would remember his face. He knew that much. He had one job in that moment, and it was to make sure that when she was 25 and thinking about this morning, the thing she remembered was that her father had known immediately and had never once acted like she was overreacting. Down the hall, a door opened. Bridget came in wearing a silk robe with her name stitched across the back in white script. Her hair was already up in pins for the stylist. She had a coffee mug in her hand. She stopped in the doorway and looked at the two of them on the bed. "What happened?" Carol answered from the hallway before Derek could open his mouth. "I fixed Sophie's hair." Bridget's eyes went to her niece. Derek watched his sister's face very closely for what happened next, and he has never stopped being able to see it. There was a flicker. He gives her that. Something moved behind her eyes when she saw the raw, uneven line across the back of Sophie's head. Something that looked, for about 1 second, like a normal human being about to be horrified. Then it went out. He watched her recalculate. He watched her look at the clock on the wall, and at her mother in the hallway, and at the dress bag hanging on the closet door across the room. He watched his sister count the hours until 2 o'clock. She let out a breath. "Well," she said. Derek turned so his body was between Sophie and the doorway. "Well, what?" "Don't do that." "Well, what, Bridget?" Bridget shifted the mug to her other hand. She would not settle her eyes anywhere. "I mean, maybe Mom had a point." The room was very quiet. "You agree with this," Derek said. "I didn't say I agree with how she did it." "Answer the question." "She probably did look too dressed up, okay?" It came out fast and defensive, and once it was out, Bridget seemed to decide she might as well stand on it. The crown and the dress and everything down her back, it was a lot. It was a lot, Derek. Everybody was going to be taking pictures of her. "She's 5. I know how old she is." "Then say her name." Bridget blinked. "What? You've been in this room for 90 seconds and you haven't said her name once. Say it." Bridget's jaw tightened. She did not say it. And then Sophie spoke. She had been silent the whole time, pressed against Derek's chest. Now she turned her head and looked at her aunt, and her voice came out small and thin and completely sincere. "I wanted to look pretty for you." Derek felt his sister's silence land in the room. Bridget looked at the floor. She looked at the window. She adjusted the belt on her robe. She did not answer. She did not say, "I'm sorry." She did not say, "Oh, honey, come here." She did not put the coffee down and cross the 4 feet of carpet between them. She stood there and let a 5-year-old wait for an answer that never came. Something broke in Derek then. He has tried 100 times to describe it, and the closest he can get is that it did not feel like breaking. It felt like a door closing, very softly, all the way. He thought about the folder in his kitchen drawer, the venue, the catering, the flowers and the arch, the photographer and the second shooter, the DJ and the uplighting, the linens and the chair covers and the $400 of candles, the car for the bridal party, because it would look nice in the pictures. He thought about the furnace, the car insurance, 3 years of groceries that were never a mistake. He thought about a Sunday in a hospital hallway and a promise he made in a parking garage to a man who was already gone. And he looked at these 2 women standing shoulder to shoulder in a bedroom doorway, on the same side, against a child who could not defend herself, because they were worried about who people would be looking at. Derek stood up with Sophie in his arms. "Get dressed," he said to her quietly. "Your regular clothes. The jeans." Sophie's arms tightened around his neck. "Are we not going?" "No, baby. We're not going." He set her down on her feet. Bridget's expression changed. "Wait, what are you doing?" Derek picked up his daughter's small suitcase from beside the dresser and set it open on the bed. Derek. Bridget put the mug down on the dresser hard enough to slosh. Where are you going? He put the folded pajamas in the case. Home. The wedding is today. Not anymore. Bridget laughed. It was an ugly, nervous sound with nothing behind it. What is that supposed to mean? Derek straightened up. He took his phone out of his pocket and unlocked it and opened the folder of receipts he had photographed and saved, because he was a man who kept records, because he had spent his whole adult life being the person who kept the records for everybody else. He turned the screen toward her. I paid the venue. Bridget stared at the phone. I paid the caterer. Deposit and balance. Thursday. Her mouth opened slightly. The photographer, retainer, and the second shooter. Carol came into the room. Derek, don't be ridiculous. He kept going. He did not raise his voice once. He said each one the way he would read a delivery manifest to a foreman. The flowers, the arch, the DJ, the uplighting, the transportation, the linens, the chair covers, the candles. Bridget's eyes filled. You can't, she said. You can't cancel my wedding. Derek put the phone back in his pocket. I can cancel the things I paid for. He did not shout. He wants that on the record, for himself if for nobody else. He did not shout, he did not swear, he did not put a hand on anybody, he did not break a single thing in that house. He walked out to the front porch in a t-shirt and sweatpants with bare feet on cold concrete, and he made phone calls. The morning was gray and damp. There was a smell of wet asphalt and somebody's early charcoal grill 2 streets over. A dog barked twice and stopped. The venue manager picked up on the 3rd ring. His name was Alan, and he had done the walkthrough with Derek in February, because Derek was the one who had come out with a checkbook and asked about the parking and the sound ordinance. Mr. Lawson, we're all set on our end. We've got the tables going up right now. Alan, I'm withdrawing my financial support for this event. There was a pause. I'm sorry, sir. Say that again? I'm the payer of record. I'm pulling out. Whatever's non-refundable, keep it. I'm not asking you to eat anything. I'm telling you the balance stops here and nothing else gets billed. Another pause. Longer. Sir, is everything all right? Derek looked out at the street. No, he said. It isn't. Do what you need to do on your end. The caterer was harder. The woman on the phone had already sent a crew to the kitchen, and she was, understandably, not in a forgiving mood. She told him the food was purchased. He told her he understood, and that he was not asking for that money back. She softened about 10% and said she would cancel the staffing. The photographer answered on the first ring and was gracious about it in a way that almost undid him. The florist was already in her van. She said the arch was in the back. She said it very gently, like she could hear something in his voice. Sir, if you don't mind me asking, is it off, or is it postponed? It's off. I'm sorry. So am I. Some of it he got back. Most of it he did not. He did the arithmetic in his head as he went, and he stopped doing it after the 3rd call, because it did not matter, because there is no number that competes with the sight of your daughter touching the back of her own head like she has done something wrong. The screen door opened behind him. Bridget came out onto the porch. She had been crying hard. Her face was blotched and shining, and the pins in her hair had started to slide. Stop, she said. Derek, stop calling people. He kept the phone in his hand. You're doing this because of hair? Her voice cracked all the way through. It's hair. It's hair, Derek. It grows. No. No what? No, I'm not doing this because of hair. Then why? She threw her arms out. Tell me why. Because I don't understand. I have done nothing to you. I have never done anything to you. Derek turned to face her. Because this was never about hair, he said. You know that. You knew it the second you walked into that room. You looked at her, and you did the math, and you decided that acknowledging what happened would cost you your 2 o'clock. That is not fair. She asked you a question. She asked it in front of you, out loud, and you stood there and you drank your coffee. Bridget put a hand over her mouth. I didn't know what to say. There was one thing to say. You're ruining my wedding. You were happy to let me pay for everything, Derek said. She flinched like he had thrown something. That's not 9 months. The venue, the food, the flowers, all of it. Not once did you ask me if it was hard. Not once did you ask me what I had to move around. You said thank you, and you sent me another invoice. I thought you wanted to help me. I did. Then why are you doing this? She was sobbing now, both hands up by her face. Why? Derek looked at his sister and told her the truest sentence he owned. Because helping you doesn't mean I have to keep paying for people who hurt my daughter. Bridget stood there with her mouth open. Then she turned her head toward the door, the way she had turned toward Carol in that kitchen in November, the way she had done her entire life. Mom. Carol came out onto the porch. She still had the rollers in. She looked at her daughter crying, and she looked at her son standing there with the phone in his hand, and Derek waited, honestly waited, one last time, to see what she would say. This is your brother's fault, Carol said. He's always spoiled that girl. Now look what he's done to you. Derek laughed. One short sound. It surprised him as much as it surprised them. He was not laughing because anything was funny. He was laughing because a thing he had been carrying for 34 years finally set itself down. His mother had been on that porch for 15 seconds. Her granddaughter was in the back bedroom with her hair hacked off, sitting on a bed, holding a stuffed rabbit. Carol had not asked about her. Not once. Not this morning, not in the bathroom, not now. She had asked about Bridget. She was always going to ask about Bridget. Derek had spent his whole life believing that if he was good enough, useful enough, quiet enough, patient enough, his mother would eventually turn and see him standing there. He had paid for that belief in installments for 3 years, and this morning the account closed. You're right, he said. Carol blinked. What? You're right that I've made choices about that girl. He put the phone in his pocket. I'm about to make another one. He went inside. He carried the suitcase out with one hand and his daughter with the other arm, and he did not stop when Bridget said his name, and he did not stop when his mother said it either. He buckled Sophie into her seat. He put her rabbit in her lap. He walked around the front of the SUV, and the two of them stood there on the porch watching him, and he pulled out and drove down that street for what he was fairly sure would be the last time. 2 blocks later, at a stop sign, Sophie spoke up from the back. Daddy. Yeah. Am I in trouble? Derek pulled over. He put the truck in park right there on the side of the road and turned around in his seat and looked at her. No, he said. You are not in trouble. Not even a little bit. Not for 1 second of this. Is Aunt Bridget mad? Probably. Because of me? No, sophomore. He reached back and put his hand on her knee. Because of her. She thought about that. Can we get pancakes? Derek felt his eyes sting for the first time all morning. Yeah, he said. We can get pancakes. They did not make it to pancakes. They made it 4 miles, to a diner with a gravel lot on the edge of Cedar Ridge, and Derek had just gotten Sophie out of her seat when his phone rang. Wesley Grant's name on the screen. Derek looked at it for a moment. Then he answered. Wesley. Derek, what in the world is going on? Bridget called me, and I couldn't understand 2 words. The venue called my mother. My mother is standing in her kitchen in her good dress. Where are you right now? I'm in my truck. I'm 2 minutes from your mom's house. Then go there, Derek said. I'll meet you. He put Sophie back in the seat. She did not complain, which somehow made it worse. Are we going back to Grandma's? For a few minutes. Then we're going home. I promise. Wesley's truck was in the driveway when Derek pulled up. Wesley was standing beside it in a gray suit with the jacket still on the hanger hook inside the cab, wearing the pants and the white shirt and no tie yet, and he was already halfway to the porch when he saw Derek's SUV. Bridget came out the front door and went to him, and she was crying so hard she could barely stand up straight. What happened? Wesley said. Bridge. Talk to me. Bridget pointed back at the driveway. He canceled the wedding. Wesley turned. He looked at Derek getting out of the truck. His face was open and confused, a man trying to solve something with no pieces on the table. Why? He said. Derek. Why? Derek did not answer. That was deliberate. He had thought about it on the 4 miles back. He could have stood in that driveway and made his case. He could have laid it all out and won the argument easily in under a minute. He did not want to win an argument. He wanted Wesley Grant to find out what he was marrying into without any help from him, because a thing you are told can be argued with later, and a thing you see for yourself cannot. Derek walked around and opened the back door and lifted Sophie out. He carried her inside and set her on the couch in the living room with the rabbit, and he stayed near the doorway. Wesley came in behind them. He stopped in the middle of the room. He saw her. Derek watched a decent man's face come apart in stages. First the not understanding, then the understanding, then something worse than anger, something like grief. Wesley crouched down in front of the couch, all the way down, so his eyes were below hers. He put his hands on his knees. "Hey, kiddo," he said. His voice was rough. "Sophie, what happened to you?" Sophie looked at him. She looked at her aunt standing in the doorway behind him. And then she said it in the smallest voice because she had heard it and she believed it, the way children believe the reasons adults give them. "Grandma cut my hair because Aunt Bridget needed to be prettier." Nobody moved. The clock over the mantel made its small sound. Outside, a truck went by on the street. Wesley stayed down on the floor a moment longer. Then he stood up slowly, and he turned around. "Is that true?" Bridget's hands were over her mouth. "I didn't cut it. That's not what I asked you." "Wesley, did you agree with it?" He said it very quietly. "That's the question. Did you agree with it?" Bridget's eyes went to Carol. Standing in the hallway arch, Derek watched her do it again. Third time in one morning, 29 years old, and she still could not answer a question without checking her mother's face first. "It's not that simple," Bridget said. "It's the simplest thing in the world. You weren't here. I'm here now." Wesley's voice did not rise. "And you can't say no. That's the answer, Bridget. You could have said no in half a second, and you can't say it." Bridget started to cry again. Wesley turned to Carol. "Why would you do that to a 5-year-old? Carol drew herself up. Derek almost admired it. There was not one visible crack in the woman. "She was taking attention away from my daughter," Carol said. "On the most important day of her life. I made a decision. Somebody had to. She's a child. She'll survive it." Wesley looked at her for a long moment and shook his head, and there was something final in the way he did it. Then he turned back to Bridget. He looked at her the way you look at a house you have driven past 1,000 times and have only just now noticed is leaning. "I don't know what I'm supposed to say," he said. Bridget grabbed his sleeve with both hands. "Please, please don't leave. We can still do it. We can do it at the courthouse. We don't need any of it. I don't care about any of it, Bridge. Wesley, please. I need time." He said it kindly. That was the terrible part. He was not cruel about it. He put his hand over hers once, and then he took her fingers off his sleeve and walked out through the front door. The screen banged in the frame. Bridget stood there for a second, and then her legs went out from under her, and she sat down hard in the armchair by the window and folded forward with her arms over her head. Carol went to her and put a hand on her back and looked up at Derek with pure hatred. "Are you happy?" Derek looked back at her. "No," he said, and it was true. He was not happy. He felt hollowed out and sick, and every single thing he had built for 3 years was smoking on the ground behind him. But he was not sorry either, and he never became sorry, and he wants that understood. The wedding did not end because he made phone calls. It ended because a man walked into a living room and saw a little girl on a couch and asked one simple question, and the woman he was going to marry looked at her mother before she answered. Derek picked up his daughter. "Come on, baby. We're going home." Nobody stopped him at the door. On Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, while 120 people did not gather at a venue on the north side of Cedar Ridge, Derek Lawson sat on the floor of his bathroom with a towel around his daughter's shoulders and a comb in his hand. He had watched 4 videos on his phone. He had gone out that morning and bought scissors that were made for hair, which turned out to be a thing that existed and cost $11. "Okay," he said. "Hold still. I'm going to make it even. Will it look nice? It's going to look like a haircut you chose." He worked slowly. He took off far less than he was afraid he would have to. When it was done, it sat just under her chin in a clean line, and it was not perfect, but it was even, and it looked deliberate. Sophie stood on the closed toilet lid to see herself in the mirror. She turned her head one way and then the other. She put her hand up and touched the ends where they curved in. "It's short. It's like a grown-up. A little." She looked at herself a while longer, and Derek stood behind her and made himself breathe. "I like it," she decided. He got the flower crown out of the bag and set it on her head, and she wore it around the house for the rest of the day, and neither of them said one word about the wedding. By Monday, the arithmetic arrived. Derek sat down with his laptop and a cup of coffee and went through it line by line because that was who he was, because a man who cannot look at the number is a man who is going to lie to himself about it later. Some of it came back. The photographer refunded most of the retainer without being asked. The DJ kept half. The transportation company kept the deposit, and released the rest. The venue kept everything, which was in the contract, which Derek had read before he signed it. The caterer kept the food cost and refunded the labor. The florist sent back more than she had to, along with a short note that said only, "I hope your daughter is all right." He totaled the losses. He looked at the number for a long time. Then he closed the laptop and went to work because he had 4 appointments in 3 counties and a daughter who needed shoes. His mother called on Monday evening. "You need to fix this." "Hello to you too. The whole church knows. Do you understand what you've done to us?" Dinah Powell asked me at the pharmacy if it was cold feet. "Then tell her the truth. Don't be smart with me." A breath on the line. "About the mortgage. It comes out on the 5th. There it was. 90 seconds. Derek was in his driveway with the engine off. He watched the light in Sophie's window across the yard. "Mom, I need you to listen to me because I'm only going to say this once and I'm not going to argue about it. Derek, I will keep paying toward your medical expenses. The insurance supplement, the co-pays for the cardiologist, the prescriptions. I committed to that and I'm not going back on it. That continues. And that's it. That's the whole list." Silence. "Everything else stops," he said. "The mortgage help stops. Your car insurance comes off my policy on the 1st of next month. So you need to call and get your own before then, and I'll text you 2 numbers to call so you're not doing it blind. The groceries stop. Bridget's phone bill comes off my account. The restaurant money stops. There will be no more of it, and there is no version of this where it comes back. You cannot be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Her voice climbed. "You are abandoning your family." "No," Derek said. "I'm stopping you from depending on me. Those are different things, and I'm done letting you call them the same. After everything I did for you, good night, Mom." He hung up. Bridget called 11 minutes later, which he had expected. "Mom says you're cutting me off." "Yes." "My phone bill?" "Derek, my phone bill is $48. Then it'll be easy for you to pay." "What am I supposed to do now?" She was not crying this time. She was furious, which he found easier to deal with. "Do you understand my situation? I have no wedding. I have no fiancé. I have $400 in an account." Derek looked out the windshield. "Get a job." "Oh, that's helpful. It's the only answer there is. You know how hard it is out there. You have no idea. I've applied to places, and they don't even email you back. I know it's hard. You have money." Derek let that sentence sit in the air because he wanted to hear it clearly and because he wanted to remember it. "I have a daughter," he said. Bridget did not have anything to say to that. He said goodnight and ended the call and sat in his truck for a while in the dark. Here is the thing he understood that week, and it did not comfort him. He had done this. Not the scissors. Not the mourning. He had not put that in his mother's hand. But for 3 years, he had run a system where 2 grown women had no reason to solve a single problem. He had made himself the answer to every question. When the furnace failed, Derek. When the insurance renewed, Derek. When a job got hard and quitting looked easy, well, Derek was there, so how bad could quitting really be? He had believed that made him a good son and a good brother. He had worn it like a coat. What he had actually built was a room with no floor in it, and he had held them up in that room with his own 2 arms for 3 years, and then he had let go, and they were shocked to discover how far down it was. It was not cruelty to stop. It had been cruelty to start. 3 months later, Bridget was working. Derek heard it from a cousin, not from her. She had taken a position at a medical billing office out on Halstead, entering claim codes in a room with 14 other people and no windows. It paid what those jobs pay. It started at 7:30 in the morning. She had moved out of Carol's house in August into a 2-bedroom apartment above a hardware store, splitting rent with a woman she barely knew from the dental office days. It was not the job she had pictured for herself. It was not any part of the life she had described in that diner booth with her phone turned around on the laminate. She still blamed him, sometimes. Derek knew that, too. She told people that her brother had canceled her wedding over a haircut. He heard about it twice and did not correct it either time. But there was something else happening in her as well, slower and quieter, and he did not see it for a long while. She paid her own phone bill. She bought her own groceries. She sat in a chair for 8 hours a day and did work that nobody thanked her for. And something in a person changes when they do that for 100 days in a row. Carol did not adjust as well. Without Derek's $420 a month, the mortgage on the house in Cedar Ridge became a math problem she could not solve. She held on through the summer. In September, she listed the house and sold it in November, and she moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a complex out by the highway with beige carpet and a small balcony. She sold the second car, the one that had sat in the driveway for 2 years going nowhere. She stopped ordering the Friday takeout that had been costing her more per month than her water bill. She started clipping coupons, which Derek learned from his aunt, who reported it in a tone of genuine scandal. For the first time since 1989, Carol Lawson sat down at a table with a pen and a bank statement and had to know what things cost. She called him on a Thursday evening in late October. Derek was standing at the sink washing a pot. Sophie was on the living room floor with a coloring book and a plastic tub of markers, and her hair had grown out enough to touch her shoulders again. "Derek, Mom, I want to see Sophie." He turned the water off. He did not answer right away. He stood there with the wet pot in his hands and let the silence do the work. "Derek, did you hear me? I heard you. Please." Her voice was different than it had been in April. Thinner. "Please, I want to see my granddaughter. You can see her when she's comfortable. When she's comfortable, she's 5 years old. She doesn't decide those things." "She's 6 now," Derek said. "Her birthday was in September." The line went quiet. "I know that," Carol said, but she said it too fast. Derek let that go too. He was learning that he did not have to pick up every single thing that was dropped in front of him. "She misses me," Carol said. Derek turned and looked into the living room. His daughter was lying on her stomach with her feet in the air, working very hard on a picture of a house with an enormous orange sun over it. She was humming something with no tune. Her markers squeaked on the paper. In 7 months, Sophie had asked about Grandma exactly twice. Once in June, and once at the start of school, and both times she had accepted the answer and moved on within a minute, the way a child does with a subject that has quietly stopped being safe. "Does she?" Derek said. Carol did not answer. "I'm asking you honestly, Mom. Not to hurt you. When was the last time you did something that made that little girl feel wanted? I've been her grandmother her entire life. You've been in the room her entire life. That's not the same job. I don't have to listen to this. You called me." He heard her breathing. He waited. He had gotten very good at waiting. "You hurt her," he said. "I made a mistake." "No." Derek set the pot down in the rack. "A mistake is when your hand slips. You went and got the scissors out of a drawer in the kitchen. You carried them down the hall. You opened a door. You stood over a sleeping child, and you made a series of choices, one after another. And at every single one of them, you could have turned around and walked back out. Derek, you made a choice. Say the word, and I'll listen to the rest of it. But I'm not going to sit here and let you call it an accident." Carol started crying. He had heard his mother cry twice in his life. At his father's funeral, briefly, and once when Bridget was in the hospital at 19. She was not a woman who cried where anyone could see it. He did not soften. That was the hardest thing he did that year, and he did it standing in his own kitchen with a dish towel in his hand. "I am still her grandmother," Carol said. "Yes, you are. Then what do you want from me?" "I want you to become a better one." "How?" It came out of her raw. "How am I supposed to do that when you won't let me near her?" "By accepting that you don't control her," Derek said. "Not her hair, not her clothes, not her schedule, not her school, not where she sits at a table, not whether she gets to be excited about something. She is not a decoration in your life, Mom. She's a person, and she belongs to herself, and you are a guest." A long silence. That's a hard thing to say to your mother. It's a hard thing to have to say. She was quiet for a while. Then, "The apartment has a little balcony. I put a bird feeder out." Derek recognized the move, changed the subject, softened the room, let the last 5 minutes quietly not have happened. He had watched her do it his whole life. He let her have it because he had said what he needed to say, and repeating it would only have made it smaller. "That's nice, Mom. The Cardinals come in the morning. Sophie likes Cardinals." He heard his mother take a breath on the other end of the line, and he understood that he had just handed her something, a single thread, 1 inch long. "Does she?" Carol said. "Good night, Mom." A year after the wedding that never happened, on a warm Saturday in April, Bridget knocked on Derek's front door. She had texted first. That was new. A week earlier, and then again the day before, asking if it was all right, saying she would understand if it wasn't. Derek had shown the messages to Sophie and asked her, honestly, with no lean in his voice at all. Aunt Bridget wants to come by and say hello. You don't have to say yes. If you say no, that's the end of it and nobody's going to be upset with you. Sophie had thought about it for a while, sitting on the arm of the couch. Is she still mad? I don't think so. But you're allowed to still be mad if you are. I'm a little mad. That's fair. She can come, Sophie said. But I'm going to be busy, which was how Bridget Lawson came to be standing in a living room while her niece pointedly worked on a puzzle on the floor without looking up. She looked different, thinner in the face. She was wearing a work polo with a company logo on it because she had come straight from a Saturday shift. There were no rings on her fingers. Hi, Sophie. Hi. Bridget held out a small gift bag. She held it awkwardly, at the wrong distance, the way you hold something when you're not sure it will be taken. Sophie looked at Derek. Derek nodded once. She came over and took the bag and sat back down on the carpet with it. Inside was a hairbrush. A good one, the kind with the soft bristles with small painted flowers up the handle. Under it was a folded piece of paper. Sophie unfolded it and frowned at it. Her reading was coming along, but not that fast. Daddy, what's it say? Derek took it. He read it to himself first. Then he read it out loud. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't important. Sophie looked up at her aunt. The room got very still. Derek did not help. He had decided beforehand that he was not going to help, not one word, because his daughter was owed a conversation that had no adult managing it. Are you sorry? Sophie said. Bridget's throat moved. Yes. Really? Yes. Really. Sophie considered this with a seriousness that was almost comical, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a hairbrush in her lap. Okay, she said. And then she got up and hugged her aunt around the waist. Derek watched Bridget's face fold. She put one hand on the back of Sophie's head, carefully, like it might break, and she stood there and cried without making any sound at all. He did not intervene. He also did not move any closer. After a minute, Sophie let go and went back to her puzzle, having concluded her business. Bridget wiped her face with the back of her wrist and turned toward Derek. I understand now, she said. Understand what? That you weren't trying to punish me. She looked at the carpet, then made herself look up. I thought you were. For a long time. I told people you were. I said my brother blew up my wedding to teach me a lesson. Derek waited. You were protecting her, Bridget said. Yes. That's all it was. That's all it ever was. Bridget nodded and pressed her lips together. I was selfish, she said. I keep going back to that morning. I've gone back to it 1,000 times. And it's not Mom I can't get past. I know what Mom is. It's me standing in that doorway with a cup of coffee, doing the math on my own schedule while she asked me a question. She wiped her eye again. I could have fixed the whole thing in 4 seconds. I could have put the cup down. Derek did not tell her it was okay. He did not say we're good, or forget it, or it's in the past. He had thought about this moment more than once, and he had decided a long time ago that he was not going to hand out a forgiveness he did not actually feel, because a forgiveness like that is worth nothing to either person, and it teaches exactly the wrong lesson. He looked at his sister and said the only thing he had. Don't be that person anymore. Bridget held his eyes. I won't. Good. He walked her out to her car. At the curb, she stopped with her hand on the door. Wesley got engaged, she said. In February. I saw it on his cousin's page. I'm sorry. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just wanted to say it out loud to somebody who knows the whole story. She shrugged, and there was something almost steady in it. I earned it. That's the part one finally get. Nobody did it to me. She got in and drove off. Things with his mother stayed distant, and Derek made his peace with that. Carol saw Sophie 4 times that year, always at Derek's house, always with him in the room, never for longer than an afternoon. She learned, slowly and not gracefully, to ask before she touched anything. She brought a bag of birdseed once and let Sophie fill a feeder on the back porch, and that was the best of them. Derek never once let Carol make a decision about his daughter again. Not her hair, not her clothes, not her schedule, her school, her doctor, her weekends, her life. He did not announce this. He simply enforced it quietly, permanently, and after a while his mother stopped testing the door because it never opened. He also never forgot. That is the part people do not like to hear. He did not heal into a man who saw the funny side of it. Some mornings, standing in the bathroom doorway while Sophie brushed her teeth, he would look at the back of her head and feel the whole thing come back in one piece. The cold carpet under his knees, the small hand touching the ragged edge, the 4 words. Grandma cut it. He had lost money that year. A serious amount of it. The venue deposit never came back. The catering never came back. He had cut into savings. He had spent 4 years building one board at a time, and he had rebuilt it slower than he wanted to, and there were 2 months in there where he had been genuinely worried. He considered it the most expensive lesson his family ever taught him, and he considered it cheap, because for 3 years, he had spent his money trying to keep everyone comfortable. He had thought that was love. He had thought love was invisible and endless and paid out on the 5th of every month. It wasn't. Love is paying attention. Love is noticing the exact moment somebody crosses a line and refusing to talk yourself out of what you just saw. Love is standing between a person and the people who hurt her, even when those people share your last name, even when it costs you everything you have set aside. Love is being willing to lose the money, the relationships, and the approval of an entire family in order to make one thing permanently clear. Nobody gets to hurt your child and then expect you to keep funding their happiness. On a Saturday morning in June, Derek stood in the kitchen making eggs. Sophie came in with her hair down past her shoulders, longer than it had ever been, sleep still on her face. "Daddy, can you braid it? You know I'm bad at it." "You're getting better." He turned off the burner and sat down on a kitchen chair, and she stood between his knees with her back to him, and he worked at it slowly with his big hands. He was bad at it. He got better. He never once complained about the practice.